Welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I am your host Deepak from India. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Max Bazerman, Jesse Isidor Straus Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School, as our distinguished guest on today's episode. Dr. Bazerman is the author of several influential books spanning decision making, ethics, and behavioral insights. His work and impact have been recognized with major honors, including an honorary doctorate from the University of London, the Espin Institute of Business and Society Programs Lifetime Achievement Award, the Academy of Management Distinguished Educator Award, the Academy of Management Career Award for scholarly contributions to management, and the Organizational Behavior Division's Lifetime Achievement Award. He has also been named among HSP's 100 most influential in business ethics and was recognized by Daily Cause as a hero for speaking publicly about the corruption of the Rico tobacco trial during the Bush administration. A widely respected mentor, Dr. Bazerman's former doctoral students now hold faculty positions at many of the top business schools in the United States, including Kellogg, Wharton, Duke, Johnson, Carnegie Mellon, Stanford, the University of Chicago, Notre Dame, Columbia, and Harvard Business School. Beyond academia, he has led professional projects with a diverse range of organizations, including major media outlets, public sector institutions, and companies across industries. His consulting, teaching, and speaking have taken him to audiences in 30 countries. In today's episode, Dr. Max Bazerman discusses key insights from his acclaimed book, Negotiation. The Game Has Changed. Let's not keep you waiting. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Max Bazerman to the conversation. Professor Bazerman, thank you for joining us. It's truly an honor to have you on Business Talk today.
Deepak, thank you for inviting me to join you. It's my honor to be with you.
Thank you. Professor, the book argues that the who, what, where, and how of negotiation has shifted fast. What the biggest context change you think most negotiators still underestimate and why?
So you really jumped to the core of the book, which is that context has fundamentally shifted negotiations in a variety of ways. And the book, which was published in 2025, which means that I finished writing it in 2024, focused on the fact that we often negotiate over on the computer. We're online all the time. We have a more globalized economy. There's been power shifts across nations over the last decade or two. But today it's 2026. So we're almost 2 years after I sent the book off to the publisher. And the two contextual changes that are jumping out today that I really don't address in the book sufficiently is the AI revolution and how AI is affecting negotiation, how AI is helping people plan for negotiation, how we interact when we're negotiating with bots, how we can prompt a bot to negotiate effectively for us. So there's so many issues having to do with AI. And the other major contextual change is the trade policies, the tariff policies of the president of the country I live in, specifically how Donald Trump has really upended trade relations across the globe. So I see those as today the two most central contextual changes.
Professor, when a negotiation moves from in-person to Zoom, what specifically changes in information flow, trust building, and leverage? And what should a prepared negotiator do differently before the first call?
So we have a term called richness. How rich is the means by which we interact. So we could think of as in person as being richer than on Zoom, and Zoom being richer than a telephone call, and a telephone call being richer than an email communication. And richness allows us to communicate subtleties more effectively. And that means it's easier to create value. It's easier to create gains from trade across issues, the more rich the interaction. So Zoom is a dramatic improvement over how we have interacted with people when we couldn't be with them face to face, but it's not as good as face to face in a variety of ways. So if we're replacing face to face with Zoom, I think that the message should be that you need to prepare more thoroughly. You might want to think more about any documentation that you want to send to the other side in advance. You want to think about what would happen in the negotiation that would lead you to want to call a pause so you can collect your thoughts more thoroughly or talk to other colleagues within your organization. So I think a lot more preparation and more careful consideration about how you might react based on events that might come up in the actual negotiation.
Professor, political polarization is now part of many workplace and market conversations. How do you negotiate productively across value-based disagreements without either escalating conflict or compromising core principles?
Well, sometimes we might simply need to walk away. So if someone wants me to provide some kind of advice, and it would violate my core principles. So recently, I had a client where I was asked to censor how I would write a report. And it was connected to polarization and it connected to current government issues within the United States. And I don't work within a context of being censored. So for me, this is an easy call. Sort of, I was going to reach an impasse. I was going to lose I was going to lose a business deal, but in my mind, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Now, that had to do with principle. There are other times when the other side differs from us, but we don't necessarily, but they aren't in any way asking you to act unethically. And I think that, if a key supplier of a critical input to the product you make happens to have different politics than you, I don't think that that's reason to walk away. I think we do need to deal with people who are very different from ourselves, but we do need to think in advance about when does polarization move into unethical behavior, and when does that mean that you prefer to walk away to maintain your reputation, your dignity, and your own self-respect?
Professor, in a supply chain crisis like uncertainty, delays, and shortages, what old school tactics still hold up, and which one becomes risky or counterproductive in that context?
So in the negotiation field, there's a term from the 1981 book, Getting to Yes by Fisher and Ury, called a BATNA, which is an acronym that stands for Your Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. And their argument was before you start any important negotiation for the rest of your life, you should think long and hard about what your BATNA is. And I certainly agree with that. And I would add to it, and people don't do a very good job of implementing that wise advice. So we make mistakes when we don't think about our alternative. So as soon as we see a supply chain crisis potentially forming, that's the time that we want to think about what our alternatives would be. Sort of, can we get the supply somewhere else? Can we make our product with an alternative input to the supply that we're talking about? If you're hit by the supply, by a true breakdown in the supply chain, that's probably not the best time to be solving the problem. You probably wanted to be solving it weeks or months earlier than that. So I'd say by focusing on your alternatives, and there may be times when you simply need that input, and you should realize your weakness and be prepared to make some concessions so that your business can remain operating despite the fact that you might be paying more than you would want for that particular input.
Professor, your work emphasizes that negotiation success comes from adapting proven principles to new realities. How do you teach people to diagnose the context quickly enough to adjust in real time?
Yeah, so I want to highlight as a preamble to my answer to your question that negotiation of the game has changed highlights the fact that the world has changed and that affects negotiation. And the book also highlights that the basic analytics of negotiation remain intact. we still want to think about what is our BATNA, as I was mentioning earlier. We want to think about what does that imply in terms of my reservation price. We want to think about the other side's alternative. We want to think about what their reservation price is likely to look like to identify the zone of possible agreement. We want to think about what they care about versus what we care about, so we can find mutual gains from trade. So we want to create a value creating mentality. The context is simply the facts that we use to step back and say, how do I think about these core basics given the particular context that I'm in? So whether we're talking about the globalization of the economy, a supply chain crisis, Donald Trump imposing tariffs, all of these can be major jolts, but none of them eliminate the wisdom of thinking about the basic analytics applied to that particular context.
Professor, the online economy has transformed transactions and bargaining power. What are the most common mistakes people make when negotiating in digital marketplace compared with traditional settings?
So again, I think we want to be more prepared. We don't want to be making quick decisions in our online economy. And an online economy can mean so many different things in the context of negotiation. It could mean simply talking to someone on Zoom. So Deepak, you and I are talking on Zoom right now. And in negotiation, we could be simply talking on Zoom, which again is not quite as rich. It could mean that I'm bidding in an auction context in an online economy. It could mean I'm in a sort of a shopping environment where I have fixed prices that I could take or leave. So online economy has lots of different aspects to it, and we want to tailor our strategy to each one of those. And we also want to realize that the other side may well be acting with stronger and stronger intelligence in the form of AI improving as we continue to develop.
Professor, globalization increases cross-cultural negotiation frequency. What's a practical way to prepare for cultural differences without relying on stereotyping or shallow country checklist?
So I would say that it's a good idea to know about the cultural norms of the other side. It's good to not offend people because you didn't know better. So if we can learn about the other side, great. It's good to know how quickly they get to business versus believing in socializing first. It's good to know some general patterns that we might expect in a different cultural environment. But it's also good to know that people vary tremendously within any particular culture. So there's 300 plus million Americans, and I see lots of differences among Americans. But there's a bias, and social psychologists describe this in terms of we see our culture as heterogeneous or varying. We see the other culture as homogeneous. And I think the tremendous mistake, and you allude to it in the way you asked the question, if we stereotype them and we assume that all 1.3 billion Indians are the same, then we're likely to be negotiating against a very imprecise version of the actual person that we meet. So we're far better off to be informed, to be knowledgeable, to understand as much as we can, but wait till we actually interact and talk to the specific individual or company to develop our negotiation strategy for them rather than for a stereotypic representation of their culture.
Professor, the book positions itself as a both groundbreaking on context and also a conscious refresher on essentials. If you had to pick one essential concept like BATNA anchoring or value creation that people still routinely misuse, which is it?
You asked for one, I'm going to give you two. So I think that all of us can do a much better job of trying to take the perspective of the other side. So a fundamental mistake that I see people making is to give insufficient attention to learning what's in the mind and in the strategy of the other side. So one, perspective taking, and two, we have a term called the mythical fixed pie. And to this day, I'll still run into experienced executives who assume what they gain, the other side loses, and vice versa. When so much of the wisdom of negotiation comes from creating value by realizing that the pie isn't fixed, and particularly recognizing that wise trades can be made across issues that allow both sides to do better than if we simply split the difference on both issues.
Professor, workplace diversity is rising and norms around fairness and inclusion are evolving. How should negotiators think about fairness expectations across different stakeholders while still creating and claiming value?
So I think that if we think about value creation in a way that's most consistent with utilitarian philosophers like Bentham and Mill and Peter Singer, um, for them, value creation means value creation across all. And I think that a key to dealing with people with respect, with dignity, is to include all as we try to create more and more value. And I think if we do that, I think we can negotiate in a fair way, we can negotiate in a wise way, and we can be very effective in the process.
Professor Bazerman, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question. For someone negotiating today virtually across differences and under uncertainty, what would your minimum viable preparation look like in 30 minutes before a high-stake conversation?
So I'll give you two answers. One, I'm going to answer your question in the form that it's asked and say, by thinking about what your best alternative is, what's their best alternative? What does that imply about reservation prices? What's a viable zone of possible agreement? What do I care about? What do they care about? And where wise trades might be. So that's a very quick sort of checklist of things to think about. But my other reaction is, if it's a high stakes conversation, you shouldn't be in a position of figuring this out in the last 30 minutes. You should have been thinking about this a week or two in advance, so you have time to do your homework, to talk to other people who might know more than you do, and so that you can be more thoroughly prepared. So I'm kind of rejecting the 30-minute constraint, and yet on the front end of my answer, I tried to answer it in case you end up in that situation, despite my guidance to not be caught with only 30 minutes left to respond.
Thank you, Dr. Max Bazerman, for joining us today and for sharing such clear and practical insights on how negotiation is evolving in a world shaped by virtual work, polarization, globalization, and constant uncertainty. To a listener, we hope this conversation gave you new ways to think about adapting timeless negotiation principles to today's context. Whether you are negotiating over Zoom, across cultures, or in the middle of high pressure moment. Professor Bazerman, it was a privilege to host you. Wishing you continued success with your research and upcoming work, and we hope to welcome you back again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for including me in your podcast.